In a shocking turn of events, John Deere, one of the most iconic names in American agriculture, has announced it's shifting a major part of its production to Mexico. Yes, you heard that right. A company that's been the backbone of U.S. farming for over a century is now moving operations out of the country. And with that single move, Trump's years-long trade war strategy is being called into question. Farmers are rattled. Workers are angry. And the economic ripple effects are only just beginning to show. Now here's where things get serious. This isn't just about tractors and tariffs. This is about the future of American labor, the strength of our manufacturing base, and a global economy teetering on edge. Could this be the moment we realize Trump's tariffs are backfiring? Or is this John Deere's strategic leap in a much bigger geopolitical game? In this video, we're breaking it all down. From why John Deere made this controversial move, to how Trump's reaction, threatening a brutal 200% tariff, might backfire not just on the company, but on the U.S. market as a whole. You're about to see just how deeply this decision cuts into the heart of America's farming economy, and why what happens next could reshape U.S. trade policy for years to come. Stick with me. So, who exactly is John Deere? Well, if you've ever seen a tractor on a farm or a piece of heavy-duty farming equipment, chances are it was made by John Deere. The company was established in 1837 and has since become synonymous with American agriculture. It's not just a brand, it's a symbol of hard work and innovation in farming, with its machinery helping feed the world. Over the years, John Deere has grown into one of the most recognizable names in the world, standing as a leader in the agriculture machinery industry. From its humble beginnings in Grand Detour, Illinois, where John Deere created the first steel plow, to today's advanced equipment used across vast farming landscapes, the company has evolved with the times. As one of the largest agricultural machinery manufacturers in the U.S., John Deere holds a dominant market share in farming equipment, supplying everything from tractors to combines and harvesters. But now, John Deere is facing an existential challenge. In 2025, the company made the controversial decision to move part of its production to Mexico. This shift came as a response to increasing pressure from global competition, rising labor costs, and the impact of trade tariffs. But why did they do it? Well, it all comes down to the economics of cost-cutting and global competition. Manufacturing costs have been climbing here in the U.S. due to a mix of factors: higher labor wages, raw material costs, and the growing influence of Trump's trade war with China. Over the past few years, John Deere has been feeling the pressure of tariffs imposed on imported steel and parts, all of which have increased the price of American-made machinery. On top of that, Trump's tariffs on China haven't just affected U.S. companies' bottom lines. They've created uncertainty in the market. For manufacturers like John Deere, these tariffs resulted in higher production costs that made it harder to compete globally. The cost of doing business in the U.S. simply became too expensive, forcing John Deere to look for more affordable options. This is where Mexico comes in. Mexico offers a lower-cost labor force, making it an attractive location for companies looking to cut costs while still serving the U.S. market. Not to mention, the USMCA, the new trade agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, has provided more favorable conditions for manufacturers operating in Mexico. This trade deal has made it easier for U.S. companies to export products back into the U.S. without facing the same import duties and tariffs they would otherwise encounter if they manufactured in other countries. However, this move to Mexico has angered many workers and politicians. For many, John Deere was not just a company. It was a symbol of American manufacturing and economic pride. The company has been a pillar of U.S. industry for over 180 years, and its decision to shift some of its production overseas feels like a betrayal to the communities that have relied on John Deere jobs for decades. Now, let's talk about the impact of this shift. For the U.S. workers who have relied on John Deere's factories, this move is a devastating blow. Potential layoffs loom large over those who depend on John Deere for their livelihood. We're talking about thousands of manufacturing jobs being cut in rural communities, including places like Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas. In these areas, John Deere has long been a major employer, providing some of the most high-paying manufacturing jobs in the region. The loss of these jobs could have a devastating effect on these communities, many of which are already struggling to maintain economic stability in the face of broader manufacturing declines in the U.S. The ripple effects could be felt far beyond just the farming industry. When a company like John Deere decides to move production overseas, It's not just the workers losing their jobs. It's the whole community that depends on those jobs to survive. Local businesses that cater to John Deere employees, like suppliers, restaurants, and retailers, could see their revenues drop as workers leave for jobs elsewhere. For many in these communities, John Deere was more than just an employer. It was an integral part of their identity. Farmers and manufacturers who have relied on John Deere for decades to provide high-quality farming equipment are now left wondering if the company's move will affect their access to machinery, parts, and service. Could this shift result in increased prices for U.S. farmers, who are already grappling with trade wars and rising costs? In 2018, President Trump launched his infamous trade war with China, and while the goal was to level the playing field for American businesses, the outcome has been far from what many expected. The 245% tariffs on Chinese goods were supposed to protect U.S. manufacturers, but instead, they've put pressure on industries across the country. One of the most surprising impacts? John Deere, one of America's most iconic companies, is now shifting production to Mexico. John Deere, the company that's been synonymous with American agriculture for over 180 years, is now taking its manufacturing operations outside the U.S., moving to Mexico to take advantage of lower labor costs. This move comes after years of rising labor costs in the U.S., and the Trump tariffs have only made things worse. The company has been caught between rising production costs in the U.S. and the pressure to remain competitive in a global market that increasingly favors cheaper manufacturing options. Trump's initial promise when imposing these tariffs was clear. He was going to bring jobs back to America. Manufacturing jobs, specifically. The idea was simple: make it more expensive for companies to import goods from other countries, and suddenly American-made products would become more appealing. The result would be more jobs for Americans. But as we're seeing now, the reality is much more complicated. For John Deere, the tariffs were supposed to protect American manufacturing, but instead, they made it even more expensive to make products in the U.S. And this is where the irony lies. John Deere, a company that was supposed to be part of Trump's vision of reviving American manufacturing, is now moving jobs to Mexico. The U.S. government's tariffs meant to keep jobs here are actually forcing American companies to find cheaper labor overseas, which leads to the exact opposite of what Trump promised. It's an uncomfortable truth for a president whose slogan was America First, while John Deere is now leading the way in shifting production to cheaper labor markets outside of the U.S. Now, let's talk about what this means for the American manufacturing sector. John Deere's move is not just a blow to American jobs, but also to the broader agriculture industry. In places like Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas, where John Deere has long been a major employer, this could mean layoffs for thousands of workers who rely on these jobs to support their families and communities. The shift to Mexico doesn't just hurt the workers at John Deere's factories, it affects entire communities that depend on high-paying manufacturing jobs in rural America. And it's not just the workers who are impacted. U.S. farmers, many of whom rely on John Deere equipment for their livelihoods, will likely see higher prices for farming machinery. John Deere's production shift to Mexico could lead to higher tariffs on equipment and parts, further increasing costs for farmers. For a sector already struggling under the weight of Trump's trade wars, this is just another blow to an already fragile industry. The U.S. farming community could find itself paying more for essential equipment and facing a tighter squeeze as global trade continues to shift. So, what does this mean for the future? Well, John Deere is making a move that many other U.S. manufacturers are already considering. As companies in the U.S. look for ways to stay competitive in an increasingly global economy, the choice to outsource jobs to cheaper labor markets is becoming more attractive. But at what cost? For Trump, this is a political nightmare. His trade war was supposed to save American jobs, but instead, it's forcing American companies to look for alternatives overseas. And there's no easy fix in sight. The reality is, if Trump's tariff war continues, more companies will likely follow in John Deere's footsteps. Manufacturers will continue to move operations outside the U.S. to keep their costs down, and American workers could bear the brunt of it. Tariffs that were supposed to benefit U.S. workers have become a double-edged sword, creating a scenario where companies face difficult choices, either absorb higher costs or move operations out of the country. As John Deere makes the decision to move production to Mexico, the impact on the U.S. agriculture industry could be felt far and wide. John Deere is more than just a company, it's a symbol of American farming. Farmers across the U.S. rely on their equipment to feed the world. But now, with production shifting overseas, U.S. farmers face some serious questions about what this means for their future. The biggest concern is cost. John Deere's equipment, from tractors to harvesters, isn't cheap to begin with, and now, with production moving to Mexico, prices are likely to rise. Tariffs on imported goods are already making machinery more expensive for U.S. farmers. Now, with John Deere moving its production to Mexico, that could escalate even further. The company will have to factor in the added cost of shipping, tariffs, and the potential for retaliatory measures from China and Mexico, all of which will eventually be passed on to the consumer, the American farmer. For many farmers, this is a huge problem. Higher equipment costs can cut into profits, making it harder for them to afford the tools they need to maintain their farms. It's a ripple effect that could make farming less profitable for many, especially smaller, family-owned farms that don't have the resources to absorb these rising costs. But it's not just U.S. farmers feeling the heat. John Deere's decision has much broader implications for the global agricultural machinery market. By moving production to Mexico, John Deere could shift the balance of power in the global industry. Mexico offers lower labor costs, making it an attractive manufacturing hub for companies looking to cut costs. This decision could pave the way for other U.S. manufacturers to follow suit, shifting jobs and production to countries with more favorable economic conditions. Additionally, the trade relationship between the U.S., Mexico, and China could become more complicated as a result. China is a major player in global trade, and John Deere's production shift could have long-term consequences for U.S.-China relations. If more U.S. companies continue to move their production to Mexico or China, it could cause friction between the U.S. and its trading partners. Trump's tariffs, which were meant to protect American jobs and businesses, could now contribute to economic instability in the U.S. and create an uneven playing field for American companies. Trump's reaction to John Deere's move has been swift. He's threatened to impose a 200% tariff on John Deere products coming from Mexico, which, if implemented, would have a major impact on the company's ability to operate. A 200% tariff would make John Deere's machinery much more expensive, potentially pricing out farmers who already struggle with rising costs. While Trump's intentions are to protect American jobs, such drastic measures could actually backfire, harming the very workers he's trying to protect by making farming equipment unaffordable for those who rely on it. The automotive and manufacturing industries could also be affected by these tariffs. As John Deere is a major player in the manufacturing sector, the ripple effects could be felt by other companies that rely on similar supply chains. A 200% tariff would add pressure to industries already struggling with supply chain disruptions and increased production costs due to Trump's trade policies. This all boils down to a crucial question. Will Trump's tariffs ultimately benefit American manufacturers, or will they push U.S. companies further away from the U.S.? As John Deere's move shows, global competition is not something that can be solved by tariffs alone. The world has changed, and American companies, including John Deere, are being forced to adapt to this new reality. As this trade war continues to unfold, the consequences are clear. The future of American manufacturing is now in question. Will Trump's tariffs be enough to turn things around, or will they drive more companies like John Deere to move operations overseas? The battle for the future of the U.S. economy is just beginning, and the next moves will be critical. China has always played a central role in the global economy, and its involvement in the trade war with the U.S. has been one of the most significant stories of the past few years. When President Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, his administration was hoping to level the playing field and reduce the trade deficit. But instead of cooperating with U.S. demands, China chose to retaliate, hitting back with their own set of tariffs on U.S. goods. This tit-for-tat trade battle has left U.S. farmers and manufacturers caught in the middle, struggling to make sense of how to cope with the fallout. For U.S. farmers, China's retaliatory tariffs have been particularly damaging. Take soybeans, for example. The U.S. had long been a major exporter of soybeans to China, but when the tariffs went into effect, China stopped buying American soybeans in favor of alternatives from places like Brazil. U.S. farmers who relied on this trade suddenly found themselves without a market for their crops. The same scenario played out for other agricultural products like pork, wheat, and corn. Even though Trump promised to open new markets, many farmers have struggled to find buyers for their goods, and some have even faced bankruptcies and business closures. But it's not just farmers who are feeling the pain. U.S. manufacturers have also taken a major hit. Companies like John Deere and Ford, which rely on affordable materials like steel and aluminum, have seen their production costs rise. These increased costs have been passed down the supply chain, causing prices for American-made products to skyrocket. So, while Trump's tariffs were designed to protect U.S. companies, they have often ended up making life more expensive for American consumers and hurting U.S. manufacturers in the process. Looking ahead, there's a real threat of further retaliation from China. As the U.S. tries to pressure China into complying with its demands, China has already shown it can play a much bigger game. For example, China's response has not been limited to tariffs alone. In fact, one of the most significant moves China is making right now is the development of its digital yuan. This new digital currency has the potential to de-dollarize global trade, allowing China to sidestep the U.S. dollar in international transactions. In the past, the U.S. dollar has been the world's primary reserve currency, and the U.S. has leveraged this status to maintain economic power. However, with China's efforts to promote the digital yuan, the U.S. dollar's dominance could be at risk. If countries around the world start using China's digital currency instead of the U.S. dollar, the U.S. economy could face serious repercussions. The shift away from the dollar would weaken America's position in global finance, potentially leading to inflation and economic instability. If China succeeds in de-dollarizing global trade, it could cause the U.S. dollar's value to decline, driving up costs for American consumers and businesses. This would also affect the U.S. Federal Reserve's ability to control interest rates and manage inflation, making it harder to keep the economy stable. What's at stake here is more than just tariffs or trade policies. This is about global power, and China is setting itself up to become a dominant force in the global economic system. The question is, will the U.S. economy be able to adapt, or will the trade war lead to long-term consequences that reshape the way we do business with the world? The world is changing, and General Motors, GM, is at the forefront of this change, leading the way into the future of American manufacturing. While Trump's policies have focused heavily on protecting traditional industries, especially those that have been the backbone of the American economy for decades, they seem to be missing the mark on emerging trends in clean technology and electric mobility. As the world moves toward a more sustainable future, GM is already investing billions of dollars in electric vehicles, EVs, positioning itself as a key player in the green economy. Electric vehicles are the future of transportation, and GM is making a huge bet on that future. With rising concerns over climate change and pollution, the shift towards EVs is no longer a matter of if, but when. Companies like Tesla have already proven that the demand for electric cars is here, and GM is determined to be part of the revolution. While other American manufacturers like Ford and Chrysler have been slower to embrace this change, GM has already made significant strides in developing electric cars and green technologies. But here's the big question. While GM embraces this clean energy future, is Trump's focus on traditional manufacturing holding the U.S. back from fully embracing the future? Trump's protectionist policies have been aimed at preserving U.S. jobs, particularly in industries like steel and automotive manufacturing. But there's a major problem with that approach. Trump's tariffs were meant to protect U.S. jobs from foreign competition, but in doing so, they've forced American manufacturers to cling to outdated models of production. Instead of pushing for more modern industries like electric vehicles or renewable energy, Trump's policies have focused on the old guard, coal, oil, and gas-powered vehicles. This focus on traditional manufacturing could be doing more harm than good, as it prevents U.S. companies from adapting to global trends in clean technology. By refusing to fully support the transition to green technologies, the U.S. could fall behind in the global race to lead the electric vehicle revolution. China, for example, is investing heavily in electric vehicles and is already the world's largest market for EVs. Meanwhile, the U.S. is stuck trying to protect jobs in sectors that are on their way out. The longer Trump's policies ignore the rise of clean energy and electric mobility, the more the U.S. risks being left behind by the countries that are embracing this future. So what about GM? Is the company the future of American manufacturing? When you look at GM's commitment to electric vehicles and sustainable technologies, it's clear that the company is betting on a green future. GM's Ultium platform, which powers their new line of electric vehicles, is a game changer in the auto industry. By developing their own electric vehicle platform, GM is positioning itself as a leader in the green economy, something that traditional manufacturers like Ford and Chrysler are still struggling to catch up with. In fact, GM's commitment to sustainability goes beyond just cars. The company is also focusing on renewable energy and reducing its carbon footprint. In a world where climate change and environmental concerns are becoming more pressing, GM's forward-thinking approach could ensure that it remains a dominant force in the automotive sector. While traditional companies are still trying to hold on to gas-powered vehicles, GM is making the bold move into the future, embracing electric mobility, clean energy, and sustainable manufacturing practices. But what does that mean for the future of U.S. manufacturing? GM's success in the electric vehicle market shows that American companies can lead the way in the green economy. By innovating and adapting to global trends, GM is showing that it's possible to protect jobs while also moving toward a more sustainable future. In fact, embracing electric vehicles and clean technologies could create thousands of new jobs in industries that are the future: renewable energy, battery production, and sustainable manufacturing. The future of American manufacturing doesn't have to be about clinging to the past. It can be about embracing new industries, new technologies, and a greener economy. And if GM's leadership in electric vehicles is any indication, the U.S. is capable of making this transition. The real question is, will the U.S. government and other companies catch up, or will we continue to be held back by outdated policies and an unwillingness to adapt? 25. The question remains, will Trump's tariff strategy work, or has it set the stage for more economic challenges in the future? Over the past few years, Trump's administration has used tariffs as one of the main tools to reshape U.S. trade relations, particularly with countries like China and Mexico. His original plan was to push for fairer trade deals, protect American jobs, and bring back manufacturing to U.S. soil. But as we've seen with John Deere and other major manufacturers, tariffs haven't necessarily had the desired effect. Instead of reviving traditional industries in the U.S., tariffs have forced some companies to move production overseas, like John Deere shifting its operations to Mexico. Manufacturers that are still relying on foreign-made components and materials are facing higher production costs, and those costs are passed down to consumers. Farmers are also feeling the strain, with higher prices for farming equipment, making it harder for them to compete. In the long term, this protectionist approach may have caused more harm than good, with the U.S. economy facing supply chain disruptions, inflation, and increased costs for goods. Looking ahead, Trump's trade policies could have a lasting impact on the future of global trade. If the U.S. continues down this path, we might see a restructured global market, with countries like China and Mexico pushing back with retaliatory tariffs. Global supply chains will be altered, and industries like technology, agriculture, and automotive manufacturing may see major shifts. As China continues to push forward with the development of the digital yuan, it's clear that the global trade landscape is changing, and the U.S. risks being left behind if it doesn't adapt. Now, with Trump's re-election in 2024, it seems like his economic strategy will continue to be a defining factor in his second term. In fact, these economic challenges could have a significant impact on how he governs going forward. Trump has already shown that he's not afraid to take bold actions to protect American jobs, but the question is, will those actions continue to benefit the economy in the long run? Or will they deepen the divide between U.S. industries and their global competitors? As we approach 2028, the political landscape is also changing. While Trump's trade wars have sparked debates about the future of global trade and the American economy, the growing inflation and job losses might present a challenge for the president. Will the American people continue to back his America First strategy? Or will they demand a shift toward policies that embrace clean energy and global cooperation? With China, Mexico, and the European Union all making moves to counteract U.S. tariffs, Trump's policies will likely continue to define the next few years of U.S. economic growth. But there's another angle to this. Trump's economic policies could play a major role in his future political success or failure. The 2024 election might have been a win for Trump, but his economic strategy will remain a hot topic. As the 2028 election approaches, how will voters respond to the current state of the economy? Will Trump's emphasis on traditional manufacturing and tariffs continue to resonate? Or will the global economy shift towards sustainability and clean energy become a more prominent issue? As we wrap up today's video, there's no denying the massive shift happening in the world of U.S. manufacturing. GM is leading the charge into the electric vehicle revolution, while Trump's tariffs continue to disrupt the U.S. economy, leaving American manufacturers struggling to adapt. The question is, how will these global tensions affect our future? Will traditional industries like automobiles and agriculture manage to thrive in this new environment? Or will emerging industries like electric vehicles and clean technology become the future of American manufacturing? The stakes couldn't be higher. As we continue to face global trade challenges, the decisions we make today will shape the future of both the U.S. economy and the global market for years to come. So what do you think? Do you agree with Trump's tariffs? Or do you think companies like GM, embracing electric vehicles and sustainability, are the future of American industry? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Are we stuck in the past, or are we ready to embrace the future? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more updates about global trade, economic policies, and the future of American manufacturing. We'll keep you updated on all the latest developments as this trade war continues to unfold. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.